We're doing a bit of a different angle today because the sun is being weird and I didn't want half my face being washed out. So I'm going to hold the camera up in the air instead of resting it on my steering wheel like I usually do. This might hurt by the end of it. I don't know. So I want to talk about labeling and the way that it can be deliberately used to inform players about expectations and about the world. So in 4th edition, levels are broken down into 3 tiers: heroic tier, paragon tier, and epic tier. 5th edition does not do so. There are unofficial tiers that are often referred to as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, but those are never acknowledged in the rules, and they're just used by players to describe certain brackets of power and not as a distinct transition from one phase of the campaign to another. The fact that in 4th edition, a first level character is considered to be heroic tier tells you a lot about the expectations of the game, the assumptions that the game makes. You are already a hero. You are already a badass. You are already super. You are way above a standard individual. 5th edition, this is not so. You are quite common. You are on par with baseline, like the lowest that the system actually supports something being in terms of power. You're pretty close. You are above, but pretty close. And you sort of progress from there. Like, level 2 is about twice as powerful as a level 1 in 5th edition. In 4th edition, it's not. There is a sort of, you start much higher and it's a flatter progression, but it's also a wider progression. You gain more abilities rather than just becoming better. It's actually, I would say, more of a diagonal progression because you do both. I said do. So then you move on to Paragon tier, which is telling you you are the best of the best. You might be one of the most powerful people in the world. Then you move on to Epic tier, like, oh my gosh, you're the stuff of legends. A lot of epic level characters, levels 21 through 30, a lot of epic characters are actually immortal, like not capable of permanently dying. They there's one, the Dark Wanderer, that literally when they die, they walk back from the afterlife. Like, I find myself in whatever afterlife I go to. Let's start walking back to the world and we'll pick up our adventure where we left off. Like, that's the kind of epic level stuff that goes on in 4th edition. And why the term epic tier is important, because it informs the players of what is expected during that level bracket. So that's just an example of what I'm talking about with regards to deliberate naming and why this is important and why it is functional despite not having, like, I don't want to say that there aren't rules, because like there's Paragon tier feats and epic level feats, but those could just functionally be, just say, requires level 11, requires level 21. In fact, I think they do. They're grouped up like that, but like there aren't rules. No, I guess there are. I guess there are a few rules. There's a handful of rules that actually do care what tier you're in, and they call them out by name. But for the most part, it is just descriptive. It's not like mechanically different. Like, you don't become a different character when you hit these tiers. You just now gain access to higher level abilities, more expansive abilities. You get your Paragon path, you get your Epic Destiny, and the kinds of things that you will encounter in those tiers is different. But these are just examples of something that I want to talk about more specifically, and that is power sources. Power sources in 4th edition are largely just descriptive. They are non-mechanical. They again, with some exceptions, like there's Paragon paths that require you to be a certain power source class. Whatever, that's fine. Those could just list out the number of classes. It's fine. You don't get anything, like there's no mechanics intrinsically associated with being a martial character or an arcane character or a divine character, etc. But what this does is it says that every character has a power source. You get your power in a certain way, either from a god or from, arcane study or from martial discipline or from, psionic manifestations, whatever it might be. You get power. Yeah, let me just hit that note. Oh, you get power. No, you get power. And it is real, and it is effective. And that's why 4th edition characters all feel mighty, and they feel effective, and they feel heroic right out the gate. Why in 5th edition are the martial characters, that is the fighter, the monk, the barbarian, and the rogue, the non-casters, collectively referred to as the martials, why are the martial characters so weak, so boring, so ineffectual? Why do they get so few features compared to spellcasters? Because no longer are there power sources. Now, clearly there are. You have spellcasting, arcane spellcasting, divine spellcasting. But not every class gets a power source. In fact, the martial characters in 5th edition are defined by a lack of a power source. They are defined by a lack of the spellcasting feature. That's interesting to me, because in 4th edition, a martial character was defined by a different power source than an arcane or a divine character. Martial characters have a power source. It is not a lack of magic. It is a different source of power. They are martial power source. That means that they go above and beyond what a normal person is capable of. Is it a kind of magic? You could consider it a kind of magic, yes. They are capable of things that real people are not, that normal people are not capable of, because they are special. They are heroes. They are martial heroes. In 5th edition, martial characters are largely just normal people. They don't have a martial power source. Mechanically, there is nothing stopping a homebrewed martial class from gaining special abilities that go beyond what a normal person is capable of. But I would argue, in fact, I am arguing, that the lack of official acknowledgement that martial is a special power source and that martial characters should be special and powerful just like a spellcaster, the lack of that is a driving force for the fact that martial characters get so few features and are, in fact, so much weaker than spellcasters. That's interesting to me. It's because the Wizards of the Coast are the ones who did both of those things. And it's fascinating to me that they would, it almost feels like they've bamboozled themselves, They take away the power sources, and now they don't have anything conceptually to build martial characters upon. Because there is no martial power source, there's no reason to justify special abilities. There's no reason to justify these characters being capable of things that normal people cannot do. And in fact, if you run the numbers, you'll find that the very best of the martial characters actually underperform compared to modern athletes. Modern top-end athletes outperform D&D martial characters who are at their best in terms of like running speed and jumping distance and weightlifting and things like that. Real people outperform these so-called heroic martial characters because they don't have a power source. And so the designers don't have any conceptual reason to give them the ability to do anything that they don't think they could do themselves. You get me? Whereas in a game where martial characters are defined by a power source, you can use that power source to justify basically any kind of ability that seems thematically appropriate. So that's my thought on the usefulness and of informing both the designers and the audience on what it is that allows a character to do something. You've got the names for the different tiers, they matter. Names for the power sources, they matter. When I was playing 4th edition, I thought of the names for the tiers and the names for the power sources, like that's basically just flavor text. Like I don't actually need to pay attention to any of that. But actually, it's a lot more important than I gave it credit for at the time. It is important to define a class's power source so that you have a bedrock upon which to build that class's capabilities. Because if a class is defined by a lack of a power source, as the marshals are in 5th edition, then they are defined by a lack of ability. And that's terrible for building a class that's supposed to be heroic fantasy. You know, like you can't expect a lack of something to be an exciting hook, you know? Now, are there people out there who just want like, oh, I want my fighter to not have spellcasting. That's the only thing I care about. There are people out there like that. I've spoken to them and it's kind of weird. They want, the only thing they care about in marshals, like I play marshals because I don't want to play a spellcaster. All right. That's weird. It is weird to me that that exists, but it does. And so the lack of any kind of power source, I don't want to keep using that word because it's starting to lose meaning, but it's a lack of, it's a lack of power is what it is. It's a lack of ability. There's no justification for, I'm starting to ramble again. I've gotten completely off track. But anyways, you know what I'm talking about. Names matter. The way that classes are described as getting their abilities matters to the designers and to a lot of players. And that's something that I've only come to realize within the last couple of years.